Hey everybody, and welcome to a Flyin Miata Facebook Live. My name is Keith Tanner. I'm going to walk you through foamectomies. But first, before I do that, I'm going to do a little commercial break. If you go to your newsstand right now, you will hopefully find a copy of Grassroots Motorsports and the latest issue of Road and Track magazine. Both of them have significant features on our cars. There's about 8 pages on Road and Track on one of our V8 NDs, and there is a bunch of pages in here on turbocharged and supercharged Miatas from all 4 generations compared. So both good reads. I highly recommend you go pick up a copy. Yeah, good fun to read. So today we're talking about foamectomies. This is mostly aimed at the first 2 generations, the NAs and the NBs. The NCs, you can do a foamectomy, but you are dealing with airbags in the seat, so there's always a chance you could have a little excitement. The ND uses a different seat structure. We have not investigated the potential to do a foamectomy on that one. I suspect, given the way it's been described to me, that you can't do it, but we're going to focus on the NAs and NBs. Specifically an NB right now, because that's what we have in front of us. So a foamectomy refers to basically modifying the foam in the seat so that you can get yourself a little bit lower or a little bit further back, or basically make the seat fit you better. It's been around forever. People have been doing foamectomies on Miata seats for at least 20 years. The easiest way and the most common thing you'll hear is not the best way to do it. So we're going to walk through what we think is the best way and the way that we do it here. Now the first step to doing a foamectomy obviously is get the seat out of the car and take it apart. It's really easy to split them in half. It's just basically a bolt on one side and then the whole thing pops apart. You've also got to mess around underneath the plastic here to get some of the screws out. You can figure it out easily enough by playing with it. Then you've got to take off the covers. These things are held in by what are called hog rings, which are basically little, very stiff rings of metal. And there's a couple ways you can do that. You can cut them, kind of hard on the diagonal cutters, but it works. Or if you want to be a little more subtle, it'll take a little longer, you can simply get in there with some pliers and pull them open. You can see in here, we'll look in close, these are hog rings here. We've left these ones in because we don't need to take them off for what we're showing. But that is what the hog rings look like. They're all over the bottom, they're all over the sides. You'll just keep finding them and finding them. I would recommend you do this to one seat at a time so that you have one seat left together in case you can't remember how this one came apart. If it's your first time, it's always a good idea. So when you're done with all the hog rings, you'll be able to take the base off the pan. This stamped steel has some really, really sharp edges, so watch yourself. It's pretty easy to cut yourself on this. Gloves are a good idea. It's just not comfortable. And you will probably have rust on these things. This one's actually pretty darn clean, but especially on an older car, it's gonna look kind of grody, but that doesn't really matter. We're not interested in the pan today, though. So the stereotypical foamectomy, the one everyone always talks about that you see on forums because it's really easy to describe, there's a chunk of foam that sits right here, goes in the base of this pad. And so the easy way to do a foamectomy is you just cut that puppy off, put everything back together, and you're done. It's quick and easy. It doesn't give you the best results, but it's very easy to describe, which is why you often find it on forums. The tool you can use, by the way, to cut the foam, you can either use, basically you use a knife. A serrated knife works pretty well. That's more or less what was done here. You can see it leaves a textured finish, shall we say. We have an actual professional upholsterer here on staff. He's worked on SEMA cars and that sort of thing in the past. And he says an electric carving knife is the bomb. So if you have an electric carving knife, you convince your significant other or your mom or your grandmother or whatever let you borrow. That apparently makes a really nice finish. This was done with a pocket knife. The effect is much the same. But you can see what's different here is we've not just cut off all of this. We actually only cut off part. We also left a hole in here. And that's because the way to really doing this right is fitting the seat for you. And so what I recommend you do is you take all the foam off this thing, or at least most of it, and then take the back off this as well, take the cover off that seat, and then put it back together again and sit in it. That's the key, is just basically try your seat on. And then feel free to mark it up with a Sharpie, or just say, this could be a little bit better, I need a little more room on the seat. And you can take a little bit more off. You can see we did a little sculpting right here. These seats here, these these are out of a 2002 leather seats, are notoriously flat. So we did some extra sculpting just to get the base down a little further. We didn't do any sculpting on the top, although sometimes I have done a little work up here, done a little work down here to try to get a little bit more room. Depends on what you need. You can really see on this side what we've done here. We took a lot out of the back of the seat. That was to sink the driver back further in the seat, get you a little more leg room, which is always nice, especially on taller drivers. But it also has the effect of effectively making the bolsters bigger. So this seat has a lot more lateral support because you're sunk down into it further. We also took some off the shoulders because, well, I'm the guy who was doing this and I have big shoulders, so I gave myself a little more room right there. And this was very much a matter of sitting, trying it out, sawing some off, trying it out, sawing some off. If you take off too much, you can glue some foam back on again. But usually it's a better idea to just start off small, take a little bit more. You're gonna make a royal mess, but that's okay. So you do all that. Once you're done, then you can go and put the cover back on. And in this case, you can see we also took advantage of the fact we had the cover off. We had some suede sewn in here by an upholstery shop. It wasn't all that expensive to do because they just had to cut this out, copy it, put it back in again. But it made a really big difference in the amount of traction on these leather seats because these things are slippery. And it makes a nice custom look. I think years and years ago, we paid about $300 to have both of these seats modified in that way. We just took them down the skins like this. One of the reasons why you don't have to worry about the cutting being super smooth is because there is padding on the seat itself, which is why it's a good idea to even just slip the cover over the seat when you do your test fitting, because it will buckle up a little bit compared to just the bare foam. It's more effort than simply cutting off that one chunk and putting it back together again, but the trial and error is really the key to making this work well. When you're done, you reattach everything. Remember how you took it apart. Reattach everything. You can either use hog rings, which you can get from various, say an upholstery shop can probably supply them, or you can use zip ties. Honestly, zip ties are invisible. You can't see them. If you ever want to take it apart again, it's so much easier. They're not exposed to light. They're not going to degrade. No one will ever know. So much easier. So, zip ties. Now we have had some questions. The differences, I'm going to go through these one by one. And if you do have any questions, definitely put them in the comments. I will get to them if I can. We have someone watching the comments like a hawk right now. First question was, are there differences between the NA and the NB seats in doing this? The answer is not really, no. The only difference is the NB seats don't have the headrest speaker option. That's okay. They all look very much the same when you strip them down like this. So NA or NB, it works the same. One note is if you do get really, really aggressive with taking the foam out, you can get a slightly floppy looking seat cover, but you can see we took so much out of the back here, and this is still nice and firm. So if you do it well, especially if you leave the side bolsters together, you won't be able to see it. You can tell it's a little bit loose right here from the shoulder carving, but overall pretty hard to see. Now if you take this off and you discover that the seat is in terrible condition, that the foam is all rotted away, that's honestly not something I've had to deal with. If there are a lot of questions about that, we can talk to Mike, our upholstery guy, see what he has to say. This foam, you can buy this foam at upholstery shops. You could glue some more in. They'll be able to tell you exactly what kind of glue to use, but I don't think it needs to be terribly exotic. And then shape it to fit, and that'll let you repair a seat that has gone a little funky with age. The NAs and some of the early NBs are getting old enough where that is actually a factor these days, is restoration as much as repair or modification. One of the questions, is it possible to increase the bolstering? Well, we did cover that a little bit in terms of we didn't change the bolsters, but we moved the driver further back so that they're deeper into the bolsters. So this does effectively change the bolstering. You can also pack more foam on there as long as it still fits in the cover. If you add in too much, you may have to resew the cover, do some modifications there. That's obviously going to be more work, but that's what you have to do if you went a little too bulky, because there's just not a lot of extra room in there. One of the questions is about foamectomy versus seat lowering brackets. Now that's really an ND sort of question, NC or ND, because the NAs, NBs, you can't get a lot lower. These seat pads are just about on the floor. There are some tweaks you can do, taking the rear posts off, that sort of thing, to get the seat a little bit lower, but they tend to be a little more permanent. The foamectomy has the advantage of making the seat more comfortable at the same time. because it becomes a custom fitted seat for you. It also has the ability to add more lateral support at the same time, again, sinking yourself in, dealing with those bolsters. So I do the foamectomy first. My own particular car, I have done foamectomy on the driver's and passenger seat, and I've left the actual seat mounts alone. So that's my preference, is to modify the foam, make it a custom fitted seat, and not try to drop the seat. On the ND2, I understand you can drop the seat fairly easily, and that's probably a better option in that case because it's not as well suited to foamectomies. Question, is it the same for leather and cloth seats? It is exactly the same. The only difference between a leather and cloth seat is the cover. You can swap them back and forth, whatever. So no differences there at all. The benefits of a foamectomy for bigger guys. The benefits are probably bigger for bigger guys simply because you probably need a little more room for your shoulders, need a little room for your rib cage, for whatever parts it is you want to do. It'll let you get lower for sure. You can actually get a lot of height back by doing a foamectomy. And again, it ends up being a custom-made seat instead of a seat that's made for the 99th percentile population, which is going to be right for about one guy and then almost right for everybody else. So if you do it right, you end up, again, with a custom seat that feels good on all-day drives and feels like the car was fitted for you. Only other question that's in here really is basically, is it the same for the passenger and driver? And yes, it is. These seats are basically identical. The only difference is to which side the hinge is on. As for swapping seats, NA and MB, you can swap the seats back and forth all over the place. These seats are actually going in a 95. They're out of a 2002, 2003. I forget which year Elvis was. I think it's 2002. So that is an easy swap. You may have to take the sliders with you because the way that the seatbelt mount changes, I think it's all the 1.8 cars have the seatbelt mounted to the slider. The early NAs had them mounted to the tunnel. All the NAs have a seatbelt mounting point in the tunnel. None of the NBs do. So if in doubt, bring the sliders along with you. You may have to swap out the seatbelt receiver because they are different on different cars. The 1.6s and 1.8s have different receivers. For NA, trying to swap seats from a different generation in, haven't spent any time with that. So I would not expect NC seats to fit well in the other generations simply because they're a bigger car with a bigger seat. The ND seats in an NA or NB, I'd like to see that. I want to see someone give it a shot. We haven't tried it yet, but I think that could actually be really kind of nice, especially those Recaros. So there's a good possibility of that being a nice swap, but haven't seen it done yet. Kyle, do we have any questions in the wings?
There are no questions on Facebook.
No questions on Facebook. We have answered every possible question about foamectomies. It was easier than I thought. So that's basically it. If you do have any questions, if you're watching this video not live, after the fact on YouTube or on our Facebook, then definitely put questions in the comments. We will come in and answer them and try to get you as much information as we can so that you can make sure that your car has custom seats and is as comfortable as possible. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you guys next week, and everybody have a good Memorial Day weekend. Thank you.